I talk about communications often, and I feel it's very important. And communications isn't always talking back and forth. Sometimes it's just listening. And if you want to listen, and listen during an emergency, a radio like this could help. And I'm going to show you this today. This is the SUNGLIFE AM/FM NOAA emergency radio. All right, everybody, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. One of the things I like about this radio is the versatility, and we'll get into that in a minute. There's like a bunch of different ways to power this. It is a typical AM/FM NOAA weather radio. It receives both AM and FM programming as well as your emergency weather stuff. It's multi-powered, and that's the cool part. You can power this with a manual charge, with a plug-in charge, with solar, with a USB plug, or regular old batteries. So no matter what's going on, even if the internal battery is dead, even if the internal battery isn't any good anymore because somebody ran it out and never recharged it, you can still use this radio. And that is really, really cool. And that's what I mean by the versatility of it. You've got a solar panel up top here. You've got a 2,000, I believe. Yeah, 2,000 milliamp hour battery internally here, which can also charge your phone or be recharged via that little mini plug there. You have your crank, of course. We'll get into times on how long that takes to crank and how much power you'll get for it. But here's the coolest part of all. Let's say you've been using this, the internal battery isn't holding a charge anymore, it's years old. Well, you can still power it with 3 AAAs. That is a cool feature. A lot of these radios, the internal battery goes bad after years and years of storage, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. And then you're kind of stuck with a radio that you either have to crank all the time or sit in the sun to use. Now, say in a power outage, you're not going to have any light to do that. So I'll give you an example. I bought this radio. This was my first prep purchase ever. We went up to a place in San Jose, California, and I bought this radio. You probably have seen these things. It had to be 1998 when I first bought it. I actually have to tape the back because it won't stay on anymore. But I bought this radio all the way back then. And the battery, the internal battery, died on it. And I had to take it apart and replace the internal battery. And it looked like one of those packs for a cordless, a wireless landline phone. And I had to go and do that. Now, had I not known how to do that, I would have either had to crank this thing or keep it in the sun all the time to use it. Gets to be pretty useless. I only saved this because this was really my first prep purchase ever in my entire history of prepping. But with that, you're not going to have a problem like that because you've got the battery pack in the back and you've got a way to power it. So let's get into the features of the radio. All right, first off, I'm going to give you the first feature that everybody seems to miss on this radio. You'll notice the solar panel, and you'll notice there's lines around it like it's got some kind of, like it removes itself or moves. Well, it does move. And it becomes a really nice reading light. That is fairly bright. If I take down this light, you can see it. Take off the lights for a sec. Definitely read by that, no problem. So pretty cool. Let's check out the front light here. That's your front light in the front there. And let's put the lights back on to show you the rest of the features. It has on the bottom, when I was telling you about the batteries earlier, you can choose what you power it by. So if you put the AAAs in, you have to move this up to AAAs. If you're using the internal lithium ion, you have to put it back there. Down here you've got the radio feature, and up here is your SOS feature. So if you're lost and you want to be found, that's your SOS feature. So kind of cool, handy thing to have, just like a whistle. You can't keep yelling and yelling and yelling for hours on end because eventually you lose your voice. You'll also be breathing in all those particles and dust if you're in some kind of earthquake or some kind of situation where there's a disaster and there's all this dust in the air. With something like this, you can literally turn it on, get yourself comfortable, go to sleep, and hope somebody finds you. So that's kind of a neat feature. Got a decent speaker. The sound on it is pretty good. We're going to go and test the AM, FM, and NOAA weather radio in a second here. But it also has a nice rubberized coating on it. That's something I really like. As you can see, with an older radio without it, it gets pretty beat up after a while. I've had this in bug-out bags. I've had this at campouts. I've had this in cars. It gets beat up. Something like this, it tends to resist abrasions. Holds in your hand a little bit better if it gets wet. It won't slip out of your hand. Now, product dimensions on this. 6.57 inches 2.2 by 3.2. Weighs 14.1 ounces, so it's not super heavy, and that is without the batteries, but what are the batteries going to add? Another ounce and a half, maybe? So let's be safe and say 15 ounces total. So it's definitely something you can carry in a backpack or a bug-out bag. It's not super heavy. It does have a little lanyard and a clip. I tend to take off the lanyards on stuff just because I don't really use them, but there's nothing wrong with having it. You know, it's handy to have if you're just carrying it around so you won't drop it. It can clip onto a backpack or something like that. So let's test out the radio. Let's try the FM first.
Behind the nations.
There.
Ongoing opioid.
I had it turned off a little bit, off frequency. See the green light here will show you that you're on frequency, you're perfectly tuned in. This will show you your battery power. So now let's try it on the weather band. There you go, there's the weather band. And I have to be honest with you, that's pretty amazing because our weather station doesn't always come in on all radios. That's really, really a decent reception. I'll let you listen for a sec.
Those without air conditioning, young children, the elderly, and those with chronic ailments.
And yeah, it's going to be hot out here today. Let's move it to AM. Now, this may not sound too great, but we barely get AM out here. There's one AM station in Vegas that makes it out to Pahrump. It is tuned in. It's kind of low. It's also dependent on the time of day. It's early morning and the stations aren't coming in as well. But for inside here with all these lights on, that's pretty amazing. Because most radios in here won't work on AM because of the, it's just not a strong signal. And as you move it around, you can kind of hear it improving. So, I mean, while the AM signal isn't great here where I live, that's doing a pretty good job for an inexpensive radio, pulling it in. That's not bad for our local area. Just to give you an idea of what this older radio picks up on the same frequency. Absolutely nothing on AM. So, it's doing a pretty good job being able to even pick up that little bit under all these lights and indoors. I know that wasn't, the greatest AM test, and I really wish it was just it's a matter of the band conditions and AM being not that great in the morning here. And it's not a very powerful station where we are. It's a very powerful station. That's why it makes it out here. But you don't always hear it that well. So overall, I'm really impressed with the radio. It's lightweight. It doesn't feel junky. It doesn't feel cheap. It's got a nice coating on it, so it doesn't feel like it's going to slip out of your hand anytime soon. Definitely a cool little radio. I like the fact that it does have two lights on it. The reading light to me is a big thing. If I could open it without dropping the radio. I like that. I like that feature. Just to be able to open that top up, and you have a nice little reading light. And even in the bright lights here, you can see it. And then you have the front light there. And again, these lights are more to get you to your flashlights, your high-powered stuff. They're great for emergency type stuff. Keeping this where you work, maybe by your desk in an office. You can listen to it during the day if you want. I don't see that it has a headphone jack anywhere, so it might be a little annoying in an office setting, if you're in cubicles and stuff. But definitely keeping it nearby for an emergency radio, definitely a cool thing to do. So I'm going to tell you where you can pick one up. I'll have a link down below to my Amazon store. It will be in there. And they run about $27.99. So for $28, you're getting a really decent radio. And I can tell you right off the bat that back in '98, I paid $40 for this one. I remember that trip very, very well because it was my first trip to a prepping store. I just learned about preparedness and I was so excited, when you're just starting out and you have some money to spend and you're all excited. And so that was kind of my first trip there. So I can tell you that these radios have come a long way. They're doing really, really well. I love these things because I like the fact that they're kind of combined with a lot of stuff. Normally, I don't like things that don't do one thing very well. This does all the things it's supposed to do pretty darn well, and it gives you the ability to listen in. And like I said, communications isn't always grabbing a microphone and talking. Sometimes it's just listening. That's why I recommend shortwave radios for people who, have a bug-out bag, because you may be in a really bad situation where you can't get local information, We talk about the small disasters in life, but there are also the big ones too. There could be a nuclear attack. There could be something major going down. And you may not be able to pick up your local news. You may want to listen to ham radio operators. This doesn't have shortwave, but it definitely has all your bases covered, and it's inexpensive as opposed to something that had shortwave in it. And again, shortwave in an item like this, I'd rather have a dedicated shortwave radio. So for what this is an awesome deal. You know, 28 bucks, under $30, well made, picks up everything I can pick up out here. Pretty pleased with it, especially the weather band, because our weather broadcaster out here, it's 162.44, I think. I forget where I tuned it, but it's pretty close to that. And it's not very strong. And for this to pick it up that clear, that's decent radio in there. Anyway, folks, like I said, I'll put a link down below where you can pick this up. It is available on Amazon, 28 bucks. Can't beat it. You know, for a radio to start out with, having an emergency radio, even if you don't have a bug out bag and you're just planning on keeping a radio at home for power outages and emergencies, this is definitely a really good deal. I will put a link down below, like I said. Don't forget to check out our Amazon store below that. We've got everything that I try to review, I try to put everything I review in there. And don't forget to check out our Olight store. I believe tomorrow, the 28th, I will have a Olight flash sale video coming out for you. And it's a good one, so don't forget to check them out. Don't forget to register on their site, too, because it helps when you're pre-registered. You get deals. And don't forget to check out our Thrive Life store down below. Pick up some freeze-dried food. Get started with your freeze-dried storage. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching. Stay safe and stay prepared.